And those things don't sound like a big deal now, but over time, because of the compounding effect of your investments, can lead to the differences of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in retirement. So even if you're in your 40s or 50s and you're hearing this for the first time, it's still super valuable to learn and get an education on how to do that better.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Aaron, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey, you. Welcome back to the Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck podcast, where we dish out authentic advice, some humor to help you contemplate, contend with, and catapult your career. And this is Erin. I am the co-host with Nicole, but this episode is one where I am going to do an interview. We sort of go back and forth. And if you don't know me, I'm a former corporate CEO turned speaker, business coach, and author. And most importantly, I'm completely obsessed with authenticity as a superpower, like as a strategic advantage to your career and to your leadership and your business. And I essentially went from saying no thank you to a COO position to actually saying yes eventually to a CEO position at the age of 42. And it did it because I had an epiphany and I found a way to do it without compromising everything else in my life. And also, I had a pretty good bird's eye view of what works in leadership and career. So we share that too. And our mission, Nicole and I's mission, is to help you stop sweating it out at work and instead crush your career without compromising everything else in your life, because you can do that. And today we are sitting down with Tess Waresmith, who is a financial coach and the founder of Wealth with Tess. And here are some reasons I think you're going to love this episode and why you should stick around. The first is she talks about the first investment she made and how it wasn't entirely legal, which is hilarious. She also talks about her $80,000 mistake that she made in her 20s that changed her course. She also talks about the biggest myth to investing and what to do if you feel behind in investing. And she also talks about how there are so many types of investments that you probably don't even know about. And we also take a deep dive into something called real estate co-ops, which honestly, I knew nothing about. And by the way, I don't know a lot about investing, even though I ran a large health financial company. So all this stuff was super helpful for me too. And then lastly, she also talks about the important role that mindset and intention make in investing. So you have to listen to this episode. It's so good. And also, last reason to listen. I am running a first ever promotion, a contest at the end of the show where you can win a free 1-hour coaching session with me. It's not a sales call. It's not a funnel. It's a free coaching session with me, which is over $500 value. But you have to tune in at the end to find out what you need to do to enter that contest. All right. Without further ado, enjoy our collective conversation with Tess Waresmith.
Can you tell us the story about your first investment that may have been when you were under 18 for sure?
My first investment was, I think you can call it an investment. I got a ROI on my money. I lived in a pretty well-to-do town, and I lived on a street that was a little bit more middle class. And my neighbor was the town drug dealer. And he had gotten in a really good relationship with this guy that had a ton of weed back then. Weed was illegal. And I started babysitting really early on. I was always really afraid of money. Like I wanted to hoard it and have all of it. And I would find like coins and put it under the couch. And anytime I got $1, I would hide it. And so when I was old enough to start babysitting around 13 and 14, I was thrilled because then I had dollars to hide. But at one point he was like, hey, I need to buy some weed. I don't have enough to buy however much I want to buy. do you have some money? He's like, I'll give you more back. And I was like, sure. So I gave him like $200, which was at that point was like a huge amount of money. I think I was 15.
Heck yeah.
And he gave it back to me and then gave me an extra 40 on top because his weed sales were so good. And I was just like, this is a good way to make money. I didn't really have to do much for that. And I had actually forgotten about that until I started this business. But I think that lesson taught me very early on that there are a lot of ways to make money. Now, I am not endorsing illegal drug dealing or like money laundering as an activity, but that is definitely how I got introduced to lending money. And we did that a few times until he got arrested.
That's so funny because I assumed you were more naive. I thought the drug dealer was like, you didn't know he was a drug dealer, or they just
no.
200. You're like, you were fully culpable in terms of knowing where it was headed.
100%. My friends affectionately refer to me as an under the stairs kid in high school, even though I was an athlete and I was doing sports a lot, but I also hung out with all the bad kids. And so I knew exactly what they were doing. And thankfully that ended. I don't do that anymore. There are better ways to make a good return on your investment.
I love it. Well, bring us forward. Tell us a little bit about you finished college, you went off to get to the traditional job. It didn't quite happen that way. And then you also ran into some circumstances that kind of lit a fire under you. Tell us about that.
Sure. So I graduated in 2010. So into a recession, applied for a bunch of jobs, didn't get any of them. And I ended up working on cruise ships, which as an actual circus performer. So I was a diver my whole life. And thankfully I got a full scholarship to college because of springboard diving. And so weirdly enough, I got offered this insane job to do diving on a cruise ship in like a Cirque du Soleil type show. And that was pretty crazy, but it also allowed me to save a lot of money because I worked on the cruise ship. I didn't have expenses, all food was paid for, all this stuff. So as somebody that was very afraid of not having enough money for a whole lot of reasons, I thought, okay, I now have some money. I need to make sure I find someone smarter and more capable to take this and make it be more. So I hired a financial advisor, somebody I knew, somebody that I trusted, somebody that was a fiduciary. And I gave them my money and didn't ask any questions. Like I knew there was a fee. I knew a few things, but I really didn't know how it was invested. And I just assumed that type of knowledge was not something that an average person like me was capable of. So I gave her all my money, so to speak. A few years later, made a bad real estate investment, lost some money on that. And so then at that point, I think it triggered me enough to be like, all right, I need to make sure I'm doing this the right way because I've made some big mistakes here and this is starting to cost me a lot of money. So I started getting more interested in what she was doing and very quickly realized that my return wasn't great on my money. The stock market at the time, this was like the early 2010s, was doing, over a 5-year period, like 15% on average. And I was getting like 6% return on my money. So I started diving in more and basically, long story short, found a ton of fees and realized how much the fees she was charging me were compounding over time. And then I also dug deeper in an annuity that she had me contributing to, and I got some second and third opinions on that. And that annuity was essentially a good fit for somebody that was 55 that had very little retirement savings. And I was 25, 20, maybe 27 at the time, and had a long way to go to retirement. And so that was money that I was essentially like just losing. And this financial advisor got a big commission off selling me that annuity. So this all felt super wrong. I was super upset. I think in total, all these mistakes, it's around $80,000 of like investing mistakes before I was even like 28 years old.
Wow.
And it's really frustrating because it's somebody that really wanted to do everything right. And I thought I was doing everything right. And I sought out somebody to help me do it. I had so much shame. I was so upset. And so that made me go in deep and I learned everything I could. And over the next few years, I turned it all around. I made some smart real estate investments. I started investing on my own. And at some point, and I can't remember exactly what the pivot point was for me, I realized that I thought kind of everyone else knew this stuff and maybe it was just me, like maybe I was behind. And then the more I started talking to people, I realized that there was a real lack of practical education that people could understand, particularly education for women that didn't make women feel stupid about money and I felt like morally obligated to do something about it because I had learned so much, but I had also been lucky enough to do it at a young enough age where I could make adjustments. And now I'm in a great spot. But a lot of people don't learn this stuff until they're in their 40s or 50s. And at that point, it becomes way more challenging to get back on track so that you can retire. So this is not an issue or a topic that I take lightly. And I'm grateful that I had these mistakes. So now, quite honestly, I have to do what I'm doing. I have to be a financial coach and I have to help as many people as possible learn the basics about investing because one, when you learn it, you realize it's not that hard. It's actually like pretty straightforward and anyone can do simple investing strategies. And two, that you can't save your way to retirement. You have to be investing because otherwise the amount of money you would have to save would be astronomical. So that's how I got here. And that's what I do now. And it's so rewarding because there's really so many ways to invest are very simple that literally anyone can do, even if they're short on time. So that's how I got.
I love it. Well, and our audience is mostly those, 40, 50-year-olds that maybe think, okay, well, I've heard this before. I've done the basics. I've got the 401k. Maybe I've got some money and some equities. What's the one thing you think our audience, what do you think they're sort of thinking about wrong?
There are so many myths. It's hard to choose one. I think the biggest one is that it's not too late to start investing and to make a huge difference in what your retirement is going to look like. So probably the number one thing that people say to me is, I'm so behind, no matter what age they are, whether they're 35, 40, 50. I typically work with women in their late 30s to early 50s. And every single one of them, almost every single one, thinks they're behind. And you're not necessarily behind. Like behind is a very relative thing. Most people don't get their investing shit together until they're in their 40s and 50s. You're not behind. Ideally, would it have been great to invest earlier? Sure. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have a comfortable retirement, but you need to start as soon as possible. So I think that's probably the first thing I would say is that everyone thinks they're behind. You're probably not as behind as you think.
Yeah.
And you still have time to catch up. The second thing I would say is that most people feel like they are not capable of learning how to invest because there is so much financial jargon and that it's really complicated and you have to use really complex strategies to be successful investing in the stock market. And in reality, the simplest, most efficient strategies are super low maintenance. They're usually run on autopilot and they're actually pretty easy to understand. The problem is that we've been told for so much of our life that it is too complicated. And if you work with financial advisors, sometimes they'll say, I've had people work with me and say, my financial advisor has straight up said to me, this is like too complicated for you to understand, which is total bullshit. It's not. It sounds like it because it's another language. Like you just use the example yield, right? Like you don't really know what that means. Like these concepts, once you understand the words and what they mean, investing becomes really simple, but there's so much jargon and there's so many acronyms and it's just unfamiliar. So it feels scary. But once you start to break down those barriers, learning the basics and managing your own investments, if that's something you want to do, is within reach for anyone.
You talk about, the 401k being your best tool. I'm sure most people listening have some sort of 401k in place and have been contributing. What do they need to do differently or better to really maximize it?
Sure. So the first thing that most people don't know about their 401k is that your 401k has fees. There's an administrative fee and there are fees for whatever funds that you're investing in inside your 401k. So if you went through and you picked whatever random investment or just kind of did, went through the motions, but you don't really know what you're invested in, there's a good probability that you're in an investment that could have high fees. And then on top of that, there's a fee for a 401k itself, an administrative fee. Why this is important is the reason we love investing is because of compound interest. You invest your money, it grows, and then that larger amount keeps growing. But what people don't realize is the same thing happens with fees. So if you have an administrative fee and you're investing in funds that have high fees over time, those fees compound too. And you hear sometimes fees and you hear like, oh, it's 1% or 0.5% or whatever. And it sounds pretty innocuous in itself because it's so low. But over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, those small fees can add up. So the first thing that you definitely should know about your 401k is what are the administrative fees and what types of funds are you investing in, and making and understanding what those fees are. Now, one thing I will say is that if you are working at a company currently, you can't necessarily get them to change the administrative fee. That is part of the plan itself. But I will say that a lot of times nobody has really thought about this. Like I've talked to HR, like
It's HR that manages it, right? It's
yeah, HR manages it. And their number one priority isn't making sure that your 401k doesn't have high fees. So this is something that has been, I had somebody in my small group coaching program flag this to HR, and they are actually looking into it, and they are looking at a provider that's about half the fee. So matters. So understanding those pieces of information is really important. And the second thing that is really important about your 401k is making sure that you know what options you have. So another thing people don't realize is you can invest sometimes, not every company has this option, but a lot of companies have a Roth 401k option. And so there are different types of tax treatments available to you. And without getting too tactical and granular, there's different ways that you can invest in retirement accounts. If you invest in a regular 401k, you get to reduce your taxes now, but then you're taxed in retirement. In a Roth 401k, you are able to invest money now and you pay taxes on it, but it grows tax-free, and then you get a tax-free withdrawal in retirement. So those are both great options that you want to know about. I've also talked to a lot of people that don't know that they have a Roth option because HR hasn't communicated. I'm not trying to bash HR. This is just
or they probably have, but it's like in one email,
like
you deleted
Yeah,
it before you even got to it.
exactly. So I think the bottom, to simplify this a little bit, the bottom line is you really want to understand what tax options are available to you in your 401k, what types of fees you're paying. And then the last thing is making sure that you're investing in your 401k in a way that's appropriate for your age. So another thing I see a lot is women investing very conservatively, investing in a fund that maybe isn't invested in a lot of stocks. And so if they're investing in not enough stocks and more bonds, which is a fixed income, basically a tool that's going to give you lower return than a stock. If you're really new to investing, stocks have a higher risk, higher reward, bonds, lower risk, lower reward. If you're investing too much in bonds at an early age, you're missing out on the opportunity to grow your wealth when you can handle volatility in the market. And so if you're not playing an active role in how your money's invested in your 401k, it could be too conservative. It could have high fees, and you could be missing out on an opportunity to save on taxes in the future. And those things don't sound like a big deal now, but over time, because of the compounding effect of your investments, can lead to the differences of tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars in retirement. So even if you're in your 40s or 50s and you're hearing this for the first time, it's still super valuable to learn a little bit about your 401k and play an active role in how you're invested and get an education on how to do that better. It will take you a matter of hours, not weeks, to understand the basics of this. So that's the high level of how I would look at a 401k, sort of those three buckets.
What else from a basics perspective? What are there outside the 401k that people might not know or might not be thinking about in the right way?
Investing in itself can be very simple. There are really simple investment vehicles that we can talk about later. But what's going to be most impactful for your retirement is how much you're investing on a regular basis. And so what people skip is they just contribute to their 401k and they don't look at their whole financial picture and see, if I increase my investment rate by a small amount, by 1 or 2%, again, because of compound interest, that can result in hundreds of thousands of dollars later on. So doing the work up front to understand how money comes in and out of your life and how you could be investing in a way that, you're still able to enjoy your life and do things that you like, but also make sure that you're being proactive in terms of, if I invest in an extra couple $100 a month, that's a couple $100,000 in retirement. So having a simple budget, even if you don't spend a lot of money, having a budget to understand how much you can invest is really important. The other thing that I see people do a lot is end up trying to pay down low interest loans rather than investing. So what a lot of people will do is if they have a house or student loans that have low interest rates, they want to get rid of the loan. So they'll pay more on that loan to try to get it down. And while in theory, that sounds like a great idea because you're saving an interest by getting rid of the loan. If it's a low interest loan, like, if you bought a house in the last decade before interest rates just went up, your rate is probably under 5%. If you have a student loan that's a federal loan, it's probably under 5%. If you're trying to invest or trying to pay these off rather than investing, you're actually missing out on an opportunity to grow your wealth. So really important to do the math and understand, sure, if you pay down your mortgage, it's 3 or 4%, you can save some on interest. But if you took that same amount and put it in the stock market, which has an average return of 10% minus inflation, you're going to end up far wealthier if you're investing in the stock market and paying the minimums on your loan versus trying to pay that down fast and save a little bit on interest.
Nicole, what are you doing over there? I'm finally getting up off the virtual couch and making some career moves, just like you told me. And I came across your Authenticity Playbook.
Yeah, I forgot to tell you about it. This Authenticity Playbook I've had for a long time, and it's actually the most downloaded resource I have. It's basically 10 quote unquote plays, authenticity plays that you can make at work to stand out and get promoted and use authenticity as your strategy, your secret weapon.
Now, I'm really going to take this to heart because despite all the sports references, I know that it's full of your awesome and your authenticity. And it probably is going to help me go far or go home or go big or whatever the sports reference is.
All the things. So listeners, if you also want the Authenticity Playbook, you can go to beauthenticinc.com/playbook. And you can make career moves like Nicole.
Whoop, whoop, Heisman!
I want to talk a little bit about some of the bigger plays. Talk to us about your leverage points because you're a millionaire at 35. You're single. You're doing this on your own. What was that leverage point for you?
Sure. So the first thing I did was maximize everything that I was currently doing. So the first thing I did before I even started getting into some of the advanced investments was, am I negotiating my salary effectively? Am I making as much income as I possibly can? Are all my investments optimized in such a way that they have, low fees? And that's stuff that, with a little bit of education is pretty easy. So before I get into some of the other stuff, I'll say like that stuff you want to take care of first, like make sure you're getting paid what you're worth. Make sure you are looking for opportunities to increase your income. Make sure you're doing the little things like negotiating your interest rate on a big car could be a huge difference. So there's stuff like that like is important to do foundationally. But once you've done that stuff and you have the opportunity to diversify, there are so many ways to make money. Like once you start to look into investing, it's unbelievable. And a lot of it is not necessarily hard. It's just awareness and education. And being a good investor is making sure that you do the math 90% of the time. It's just about math. And thankfully now we have a million calculators online. So the first big investment I did after, getting all of my ducks in a row in terms of my retirement accounts and the investments I already had was getting into real estate. And so I bought 4 properties, and that has been life-changing for me in terms of the potential upside, because when you're investing in the stock market, obviously that's great. You get a return on your money. When it comes to real estate, you're creating wealth for yourself in multiple different ways. You have the equity in the property itself. If it's a rental property, you have the opportunity to cash flow. You have the opportunity to take whatever that equity to force appreciation, first of all, to make that property better, and then refinance and have money that you can put into other properties. And it's a snowball effect. The first real estate investment you do is probably, if you're interested in this, and I highly recommend anyone to get an education on this. The first real estate investment you do is nerve-wracking, but it's straightforward. So the first property I bought, I flew down to Tampa, Florida. I was in my late 20s, and all I did at that point was look at what's the mortgage and what's the rent, and do I think this is going to cash flow? Like, am I going to be able to cover my expenses? I did not have a super strategic approach.
What was your draw to Tampa? Like you just,
I was literally
figuring them out.
Like top 10 rental market. This was like 2013 or 2012. This was almost 11 years ago. I was literally Googling, like, what are the best places to buy rental property? I read one book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, had no idea what I was doing. Saw on online, top 10 places to buy rental property, flew down to Tampa and bought a single family house for $85,000 in a not nice part of Tampa.
Wow.
and that, and then I did not great math. I kind of just subtracted the mortgage from the cash flow and thought, sure, this will work. It's worked now because I was lucky and I bought it a good time. 10 years ago, if you bought real estate, you're doing fine no matter what went wrong. But if I did that same thing now, I would have lost money because everything was wrong with the house. There was plumbing issues. I didn't get a good inspection. I didn't negotiate the price enough. I probably could have bought it for $70,000 back then. So that property, it was a disaster the first few years. And after that, I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to
Did you move into the property or you bought it just as an investment?
No, I just bought it as an investment and I started renting it out. And it was just like problem after problem. And I didn't make any money on it for years. But then after a few years, it stabilized. I'd fixed everything. The neighborhood that I bought it in started to turn around. Tampa, if you know anything about Tampa, is exceptional at this point in terms of real estate investments if you got in the last 5 to 10 years. And so, I took a chance. I made some big mistakes. I learned a lot. And then now that same property, I could probably sell it for $350 and it cash flows about $700 a month. So now it's great. At the time, I was like, this was a mistake. And now when I look back, I'm like, there are so many real estate courses online. It wouldn't have taken much for me to learn a little bit more to avoid some of those mistakes. But I'm glad I did it because I learned so much doing it. Then I moved all over the place. I moved to Utah. I moved to Singapore. I eventually made my way back to New England. And then over the course of a couple years, I bought a couple different multifamily properties. And I actually still live in one in Worcester, Massachusetts. For those of you that are listening, is like an hour west of Boston.
Looks like Worcester. It's Worcester.
Pronounced Worcester. And Worcester is a city that is well known for many things. A lot of it is not necessarily positive, but there are very nice areas of Worcester. And so as a lot of colleges, really. A lot of colleges, great education. Worcester is a great city to invest in, or actually now it's getting pretty expensive. But at the time, 5 years ago, when I started investing in Worcester, it was a city that was sort of underrated, but had a lot of good colleges, had a lot of good opportunity. And so buying multifamily properties here and not in a city like Boston was a huge opportunity for me as people got priced out of Boston. And so I invested here. Those properties have all done really well. I am looking to move at some point, but living in a multifamily was a great choice for me at the time because I ended up then being able to cover my entire mortgage with the rent from the other units. And that is life-changing, especially if you have a decent salary and then you can take that money and invest it however you like. So that's what I've been doing now. And now I'm getting more into syndications, investing in larger, 50, 100 unit properties with a pool of investors. And I really like that now because for me, my lifestyle has changed in such that I have some properties. I still work full time as in corporate and I have a business. I don't really have time to go look for other properties. So syndication for me is a great way for me to diversify, but also not add a ton to my plate because the founding partners of that syndication are going to take care of the property. I'm just an investor and I get updates on how it's going. And so I really like that for this time of my life.
Yeah. How do you find those syndications? Is it like some super secret society where you have to be smoking a cigarette under the stairs with somebody or?
It's funny. I was actually just talking to somebody about this because they're out there and syndications are always looking for investors.
Yeah.
But I don't think the marketing has been done very well. There has been no great marketing to women as far as syndication. And so I actually have a friend that's opening a syndication in the next year. And he asked me if I would help him with marketing. And I was like, please, because there are people that have money that want to diversify, but the marketing is just not speaking to different groups of people. It's a lot of people that are already investing in real estate, where I know there are people that would be interested in an investment that's larger, a little bit different in real estate that they don't have to be very hands-on with. that sounds great to a lot of people. So they're out there. They're weirdly like I'm in the network, so I know a lot of syndication.
And once you know the word, like before today, I wouldn't have been able to Google it because I don't even know I didn't know that syndication was the term, right? The real estate syndication or whatever.
And this goes back to my point about like jargon. Like syndication is a group of people investing in a large property.
But blank, right? Like we all understand what the word means, but it's like, it sounds so toity and big and sophisticated. And it's a co-op. It's it's a partnership. So one of the things that you mentioned on another was this concept of a few intentional years. And I kind of want to end us here talking about your thoughts on really just that mindset and that, we've talked about how easy it is, but sometimes it takes a little bit of sacrifice. Maybe it's budgeting a little bit better. Maybe it's investing in programs to learn. Maybe it's starting a company where you're not making as much, or you're, moving to Worcester when you don't want to necessarily be. So talk to our audience a little bit about your thoughts on the intentionality and maybe a little bit of the sacrifice that they might want to consider to really catapult their financial position.
I love this question. One, because I think a lot of people feel like it's either overnight success or they're behind and they're never going to catch up. And it's this very like polarizing opinion of how we build wealth. And my belief on this is, depending on where you are, there's no exact set amount of years, but regardless of where you're starting today, in 3 to 5 years, your life can look incredibly different when it comes to your net worth and your comfort level with finances. And that's not just about money, right? That means like in 3 to 5 years, if you're starting in a place where you are panicked or you have financial anxiety or you're worried about retiring, you could be in a completely different place emotionally, psychologically, when it comes to what the rest of your life is going to look like, because you have financial security and freedom. And so that is why I love talking about money. Like, I don't care about mansions and cars and like, that's cool, whatever. But really, like, why this is such a cool topic and why this is so important is because it can change your entire life and the way you make decisions just by spending a couple years buckling down. So if you are in a place where right now you don't feel like you have enough to retire, or you like have no idea if you have enough because you've never really looked into it and you don't know what that number is for you, thinking about where you want to get to, whatever your goals are, and then understanding that with a couple decisions in 3 to 5 years time, you could be well on your way to there. So I'll give you some tactical examples of what this could look like. The first thing is, a lot of people making well over 6 figures are living paycheck to paycheck. So in order for them to make a difference, they don't necessarily have to make more money. They have to look at the money that they're making now and allocate it intentionally, which means making sure they're paying off whatever high interest debt they have, paying off, and then paying themselves by investing. And so a lot of people think about investing as the strategy of the stock market. Again, that stuff is actually, investing in the stock market is not that hard. There are easy tools to do that. What's harder is looking at the money that's coming in your life and how you are allocating it. So being aggressive in terms of investing more or saving more, whatever your goals are, that's the first thing that everybody should do if you're not in a place where you want to be. And then the next thing is if that's not enough to get you to where you need to be, then comes some of the harder decisions like moving or, there's another financial creator who had a house and she ended up selling her house and paying $300,000 of debt and moved to somewhere she didn't want to live. But that changed her life and gave her so many different options. So I'm not saying you have to sell your house and move, but if your goal is to be financially secure and to retire comfortably, those are the types of things that you might need to think about it. So those are kind of the extremes of how you can think about this. For me, it looked like I was in a good financial place, but I wanted to retire even earlier. And as somebody that has a ton of money fear, I also wanted to make sure that I was fine, regardless of whether I had a partner or not. And I had been through some relationships that definitely didn't work out. And I had learned that, my parents have been collectively married 9 times. I don't have a lot of faith in like long-term relationships. So I was like, I have to figure this out for myself. So for me, the benefit of moving to a place like Worcester and living in a property, it's fine. My house is great. It's nice. It's fine. It's not my dream house though. And I can afford that now. because I spent 3 years living somewhere that wasn't really my favorite place to live. But the freedom I have now to do whatever I want, that is priceless. And I wouldn't change anything about that decision. So those are some examples. It doesn't necessarily have to be that extreme. It totally depends on where you are right now. But if you want your life to look different and you invest in education and you make a few different choices, you could change everything in a couple of years.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it goes well beyond, I want to retire comfortably, or I want freedom. I think having that vision and being really specific about it and using it to fend off that short-term instant gratification stuff that often prevents that long-term dream to be realized, I think is so important.
So well said. When I do group coaching programs on beginner investing, the very first thing we do is, what is your why? What is most important to you? And for a lot of people, it's never stuff. It's always like, I want to be able to start this business and not be worried about money. Or it's, I want to help my kid do XYZ and build generational wealth for my son. Or I just got divorced and I'm panicked. And in 2 years, I want to be confident in my ability to deal with my, whatever it is. Like, the more specific you are, the more successful you are. And the nice thing about investing, and hopefully at this point, you're feeling a little bit less nervous about it, or I've repeated enough that it's not as hard as you think it is. But the one thing that I think is really important as we're talking about this is, we're talking about consistent effort for 3 to 5 years, changing your life. The knowledge you need to do that takes like weeks, like hours, like a couple of hours learning about the basics of the stock market. Like, my small group coaching program is 1 hour a week for 5 weeks. And at that point, you're setting up your own investments, and any kind of like online education, knowledge building, all that, reading a couple books, like $75 of your money could change your life. So I think that's important too. Like, when we're talking about a couple of intentional years to change your life, that's not like hard work. That is getting the foundational education you need to make better choices over the next 3 to 5 years.
So tell us where they can follow you. And then I think you have the group coaching program and you have the Savvy Investor. What's the one action you want people to take?
So the best action, if you are somebody that wants to ensure you have enough money to retire comfortably, eventually quit your day job, chase whatever amazing, freaking awesome dream that you have, even if that's just spending more time with your kids, whatever that is. I created a Savvy Investor Starter Pack. You can download it at moneyconfidentcoach.com/savvy. And in there, I put a bunch of pieces of the toolkit that I wish I had when I started to investing that's going to help you get to where you want to go. So it includes a video module on the biggest mistakes that I see women investor makes. It includes a bunch of calculators to start calculating how much money you might want to retire, where you will be currently if you continue investing the way you are, compound interest calculators. It includes need to know financial metrics and how to calculate them. It includes all the different types of retirement accounts and orders of investing in different types of things, and all kinds of other stuff as well. So it's totally free. You can download that. It's in the show notes, and it's a Savvy Investor Starter Pack. So go there, click. That is the best action, because you'll get a ton of information right at once. And then you'll also get a link to a free investing workshop that I host on a pretty regular basis. And in that, I do live group coaching too. So that Savvy Investor Starter Pack is the best place to start for sure.
Awesome. The last thing, just came up on NPR a couple of days ago. I just want to get your take, but the radio host, maybe it wasn't NPR, actually it was just like a regular radio station, had heard this and said, I don't know if it's true, but what they had heard was that between Taylor Swift and Barbie, that they're single-handedly like helping us stay out of a recession. So comment, please, whether it's related to Barbie or if you think we're going to have a recession or what have you. You have the final stage on that.
Oh, man. I'm going to say this. Last year, we heard the word recession and doom and gloom headlines all year about how bad it was going to be. And all these big financial companies were predicting that we were going to be in this horrible recession. And I'm Googling our year-to-date return right now, and it's 19.6%. 20%. We're having one of the best rallies since 1987, since like neon gym wear was.
I was there.
So, like,
I was there. I had it. You were wearing a onesie with the Thanks. I was rocking it in middle school.
Regardless, my point is that while I do love the fact that they're Barbie and badass women are bolstering the economy right now, it doesn't matter because this is the type of stuff that gets people off track. And at the end of the day, nobody can predict what the stock market is going to do. So if you were somebody that heard all this recession language last year and panicked and didn't invest, you missed out on one of the best rallies in 30 years, almost 30 years. So that's what I'll leave you with, is that investing consistently over a long period of time is the better strategy than listening to the news. Although I do like that fun fact.
I love it. Well, thanks for coming on. I'm so glad we met. Like I said, your authenticity oozes out of you. And thank you for sharing all your wealth of knowledge with our crew.
Thank you. I so appreciate you. I love what you do. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. And if you want, I forgot to share. I do have free tips on Instagram at Wealth with Tess is my handle. So follow me there if you want some investing tips.
Yeah, then you get you kind of in 3D-ish too.
Yeah.
Hey guys, it's Erin again. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I just wanted to give you the details of that mysterious little contest that I mentioned at the beginning. What we would love is a rating and review from you. And we say this all the time, and we get texts and emails from people all the time saying how much this podcast has impacted them or that they've shared with others. And we so appreciate it. But we want this podcast out to others. And the more reviews that we get, the higher our ranking, which means the more people see it, which means the better guests and the better production and money we can put into this thing for you. So if you can write a review from now until September 18th, so Friday, all you have to do is write that review on whatever podcast app you use. Google it if you don't know. And simply take a screenshot and send it to hello@beauthenticinc.com. That's hello at just the letter B, authenticinc.com. Shoot that our way, and we're going to put you into a drawing to spend an hour coaching with me. And I'm telling you, rock your world and help you propel. So go do that rating and review now before you forget.
Friends, do you have other friends? Are they adults? Are they out in the world somewhere? Please, please, please invite them to listen to our podcast.
Okay, dude, you sound like a late night, like 2 a.m. infomercial. Basically what she's saying is our love language is ratings, reviews, and sharing the podcast. We'd love nothing more than if you would do that.